Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel. A fantastic free-to-play Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game simulator with a ton of cards to choose from, fantastic music, and amazing visual presentation and effects. The game that was basically responsible for me being able to actually play Yu-Gi-Oh again after so many years, after not being able to do so for a while due to a lack of an IRL scene. And I honestly do love it, despite a few glaring issues. I've spent a fair bit of time recently on this channel gushing over Yubel, but while Yubel certainly is one of my all-time faves, there's actually a whole archetype in the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG that I can safely say is my #1 favorite, and one that I was actually properly introduced to thanks to playing Master Duel. And it really has been way too long since I've done one of these Why I Like the Thing videos, so hey, let's just do that now. Introducing for your consideration, the Darklords. Darklords are an archetype within the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game, consisting primarily of dark attribute fairy type monsters, who mostly seem to draw design origins from a combination of Judeo-Christian Abrahamic theology and pre-Columbian Mesoamerican religions. Although the first truly official release of cards with the Darklord name happened circa 2009, mostly being promotional cards to coincide with the release of GX-era manga volumes or even as YCS prize cards, and even having a couple of older cards renamed into Darklords to go with the archetype later on, they never really got proper support to make them into a fully fleshed out archetype until 2016's core set, Destiny Soldiers, which brought us many of the modern Darklord cards that we all know and love today. Well, okay, that I know and love, but hey, somebody's gotta do it. I mean, the only dedicated Darklord user in any official Yu-Gi-Oh media was Midori Hibiki from the Yu-Gi-Oh GX manga, and even that was several years before any of the modern supports. I'm just saying, somebody has gotta be the Darklord's strongest soldier, and hey, if it's gotta be me, so be it. Now, at this point, you're probably asking me, hey, what the fuck do these cards even do? So in the actual game, Darklords love to pitch a lot of their spells and traps into the graveyard, and that's because several of the modern high-level Darklord monsters, in addition to their own individual powers, share a common ability to pay 1,000 life points in order to copy and immediately use the effects of one of their own in-archetype spells and traps from their graveyard. That means you, as a quick effect, can copy the effect of, say, Banishment of the Darklords, which is basically this archetype's reinforcement of the army, to quickly search out another Darklord card from your deck and add it to your hand. Or Darklord Rebellion, which lets you destroy one card anywhere on the field. Or the Sanctified Darklord, to quickly negate an opposing monster's effects and even gain some life points back. Or even Darklord Enchantment, which lets you just flat out steal an opponent's monster and use it as your own for that turn. Oh, and those 3 trap cards I mentioned just now? All non-targeting. But now let's take a look at some of my favorites from among the big monsters from this archetype, because not only are their effects pretty cool, but also their art is just pretty sick on its own, which is honestly a pretty big part of what drew me to them in the first place. Okay, so first off, there's Darklord Superbia, which is kind of an outlier in this group, given that it's the only GX-era Darklord card that really sees any modern usage, and thus is one of the only ones to not have that copy a spell or trap from the graveyard effect, but Superbia still got a lot to be proud of. So much so that his name, Superbia, is literally the Latin word for pride, being a direct reference to, well, pride, one of the 7 deadly sins, often cited as the root of, and gateway to, the other 6, which actually lines up pretty well with Superbia's effect, which, when he's special summoned from the graveyard, say by a card like Darklord Contact, which does precisely that, allows you to then target and then special summon any other fairy type monster in your graveyard, thus enabling further Darklord fueled chaos. Shame about that when effect though. One of my favorite Darklords to resurrect with Superbia has got to be Darklord Nurgle, who's one of those bigger Darklords who does have that spell trap copy effect, is a level 8 monster that can be used with Superbia to go into some cheeky rank 8 Xyz plays, and his individual effect allows all of your fairies to inflict battle damage, even if the opposing monster is trying to hide away in defense mode. And lore-wise, he's based off the Mesopotamian god of the same name, said to rule over the Sumerian underworld alongside his wife Erishkigal, who, fun fact, is actually who the Link monster underworld goddess of the closed world is based on. Of course, I'm honestly just kind of surprised that Konami shelled out the money for a crossover with the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy for this card, but glad to see my boy Nurgle got an upgrade. Hopefully that makeover came with some slightly stronger knees. Then there's Darklord Ishel, who seems to draw quite a bit from the Mayan goddess Ishtab, the goddess of suicide, who acts as a psychocomp, an entity that escorts newly deceased souls from Earth to the afterlife, which actually lines up pretty perfectly with her individual effect where she can discard herself and one other Darklord card in order to allow you to draw 2 cards from your deck, making her a crucial piece to any Darklord engine. And also, not to be shallow for a second, but I mean, come on, she's pretty hot. I mean, I'm just saying. I also really like Darklord Tezcatlipoca, whose name translates to Smoking Mirror. No, smoking mirror, not smoking mirrors. And of course, a lot of mirrors in Aztec culture were often forged out of the jet black obsidian, which is likely why most of Tezcatlipoca's body is black, likely being made of obsidian itself. And that rock-hard bod is likely what makes his individual power to save any of your other Darklord monsters from being destroyed by sending him to the graveyard in their place. And of course, how could I ever forget Darklord Morningstar? He doesn't have that spell trap copy effect, and he actually can't be special summoned at all, but what he can do more than makes up for it, and trust me, I don't just mean being a total smoke show. If you tribute summon him, you then get to special summon other Darklord monsters from your hand or your deck equal to the number of effect monsters your opponent currently controls, and then he can mill cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of Darklords you control, and any Darklord card that goes to the graveyard this way gives you another 500 life points apiece, which is pretty handy considering how often you're spending those life points to double down on your spell and trap effects. Morningstar's origin is pretty obvious, based on Lucifer, the fallen angel from most interpretations of Judeo-Christian faiths, an angel who rebelled against God, only to be banished alongside many of his fellow soon-to-be Darklords. Of course, 3 of those Darklords can combine their might together through the power of fusion, forming the boss monster of this archetype, the first Darklord. Design-wise, he is not that much different from Morningstar, except that he now has about 1,000 more attack points that apparently made him strong enough to get off his knees, but effect-wise, he's so much more dangerous, protecting all fairy-type monsters you control from being targeted by your opponent's card effects, and letting you trade 1,000 life points during either player's turn to special summon a fairy-type monster from your hand or graveyard, both of which open up a ton of possibilities for other fairy-centric archetypes to run Darklords with. And trust me, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time actually coming up with different combinations because ultimately my brain is really just a machine that turns coherent thoughts into new Darklord variants. On top of all of this though, if you use Darklord Morningstar as fusion material, then the first Darklord gets to immediately nuke the opponent's entire field, potentially opening them up to a ton of damage that they may just not be able to survive. Of course, as much as I love all of these monsters, there's still one that I adore above all the rest, the archetype's very own Link monster, and the one with arguably the most in-game lore, Condemned Darklord. She's not only my favorite design monster out of the bunch, but she also has some pretty useful effects. On top of being fairly easy to link summon, requiring only 2 fairy-type monsters, she lets you discard 1 card to search for a Darklord monster and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard, depending on what you need. And then, if you want to summon a high-level fairy monster, say Darklord Morningstar, you don't even have to use monsters from your field in order to do it, as she'll just let you banish any 2 monsters from your graveyard instead. And to top it all off, at the end of your turn, she'll restore your life points by 500 apiece for every fairy monster you control. But as useful as all of this is, and it definitely is, don't get me wrong, what I really love about her is her lore. The Condemned Darklord, whose lore seems to draw quite a lot from the Greek mythological story of Pandora's Box, which apparently led to a lot of fans nicknaming her Pandora, which I kinda personally love, actually used to be one of the maiden/angels living in the sanctuary in the sky, under the watchful eye of the old man from the Solemn Trap cards, who's basically the Yu-Gi-Oh facsimile for the Christian god. Before too long, Pandora's curiosity got the best of her, and she began looking into various mysterious relics in the sanctuary. God told her not to mess with this stuff, though he presumably did not tell her why she shouldn't, which likely only strengthened her thirst for this forbidden knowledge. And of course, as is often the case when a mortal tries to achieve a higher state of being, God responded to this by exiling her from paradise with a solemn strike. Seriously though, could we just take a second to realize that this woman was violently cast out of heaven for the unpardonable sin of being interested in cool stuff? Her lore can literally be summarized with the phrase, "God forbid women have hobbies." The maiden was condemned, later becoming a witch, dabbling in all sorts of dark magic and occult powers, swearing revenge on the oh-so-mighty god if it was the last thing she ever did. She'd hook up with the similarly vengeful Darklords at some point, and even managed to turn a couple of God's other angels against him, ultimately culminating in an attack on the sanctuary in the sky that led to Pandora striking God down, using a lightning strike fairly similar to the one that he'd used on her, as seen in the card Witch's Strike, which I've personally gotten to actually resolve like maybe twice ever, but trust me, it is so satisfying to see it actually pop off. And thus, with this defeat of the almighty god, Pandora, the angel who was punished and cast from paradise for her curiosity, became the condemned Darklord, reigning over the skies for all of time. Alongside, of course, her girlfriend Ishel, and her boyfriend Morningstar, and her boyfriend Nurgle, and oh, what? You're gonna try and tell me that the Darklords aren't in some kind of queer polycule having regular orgies in the ashen remains of the sanctuary in the sky? God, maybe media literacy is dead. But yeah, that's basically it. The Darklords are a bunch of hot, vengeful fallen angels who double down on their spell and trap effects and have a vendetta against God. Honestly, pretty relatable, but now I want to hear from you. If you play Yu-Gi-Oh, what's your favorite archetype? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more synthily good videos like this in the future, share this on your favorite social medias, and ring the bell so you always get notified when I upload. And hey, if you're new around here, don't be afraid to check out some of the other videos I've got on this channel. Unlike Solemn Johnson over here, I actually won't punish you for your curiosity. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.